It is Labor Day, and I know all of you are contemplating the challenge ahead. I'm talking about specifically your family and friends. Expect you guys to produce wonderful, wonderful food. And what I thought it might be helpful is I get a lot of questions centered around one kind of main topic. I kind of call it the GAS for Gear Acquisition Syndrome. And somehow or other, a lot of the conversations I have with people online and in person revolves around equipment. And I call it GAS for Gear Acquisition Syndrome because you guys have heard me say repeatedly that it's never about the pit. It's always about the pitmaster. So
yeah,
I thought what I tried to do
my excuse when it doesn't come out well, though, Harry.
No, you just tell them that you have a bad instructor. Harry didn't teach you well. That's what happens. So I always tell my students, right, if the food comes out absolutely fantastic, you just say, hey, I did it all myself and I learned it myself. But if it's really bad, you say, the dang guy in Diamond Bar, he taught me all the wrong things to do. So that's how it works. Labor Day is stressful for a lot of my friends and students and patrons because a lot of times you are expected to cook. And in general, if they know that you are you watch me on YouTube or you've taken my class, they hand you the tongs and they expect you to know what to do. So the idea I wanted to have this morning is kind of talk a little bit in general about the pros and cons of different pits and then help you address any issue that you might be having, whether it's a temporary issue with accessories or it's a systemic issue you have with your pit. For example, I'll talk about the smoke fire this morning and why I think that it's got its upside and downside. And there is no perfect pit out there. But what I thought I'd try to do is kind of talk you through some of the thermodynamics, some of the design considerations, and some of the kind of pros and cons of the different pits. Now, obviously, I can talk 1 hour on one pit. So I just wanted to kind of touch on your pain points this morning and set you on the stage for success for Labor Day. And that can cover things like, okay, what am I going to cook for Labor Day? How many people are coming? How much time do I have? And how much effort do I want to put in? Do I want to go fire my big offset and 500 gallon and cook one brisket? So after this session, for those of you who can join me, I want to make an announcement. I'm going to go support Pitmaster Winnie from Smoke Queen Barbecue. She's at the Little Tokyo in downtown LA. There's a big Sunday event that happens every Sunday. There's about, I think, 100 over vendors that go out and basically it's like a food farmer's market selling food. So she's going to be there. So I know all of you will be asking me a lot about her brisket. Her food is absolutely fabulous. If you are local in LA, you have time today, I suggest you swing by. I think she's going to sell out fast. So I tell myself I should finish this session and drive to LA. It's about 45 minutes away and make sure that I'm in line before all her food sells out. I've never actually tasted her food. I've cooked with her many, many times in many collabs. In fact, I'm getting ready to post another collab. I just posted another collab yesterday. But I want to try like the plate that the public gets. And it's going to have a little bit of everything. And if you've seen her pictures, they're absolutely amazing. She's been written up in the New York Times Magazine, Eater, and so on. So I think that in terms of women pitmaster, she is going to be the new tour de force, not just conquering California, but I think that in a short period of time, she will be one of the mega barbecue stars on the national circuit.
Her food is exceptional.
Very few
I've had it.
Women pitmasters, yeah, and she's got that zeal and that glint in her eye that is unmistakable. When you meet her, she basically has barbecue sauce flowing in her veins. That's pretty much how it is. And she has the energy, the determination, and the motivation to crank out, like what 20 to 30 briskets every weekend. So even I admit I don't have the energy to be able to do that.
Hey, Harry, you mentioned the smoke fire before. Are you still on the Gen 1 first generation smoke fire?
Yeah, I bought 2 smoke fires, which I love, and they both have the retrofit. The retrofit is the what do you call the auger, yeah, and what do you call the slider for the pellet. Yeah, so I have those 2 retrofitted.
Because the small one, well, they're both they're on sale this weekend for $200 off. If I
wait, wow.
Again, I would have bought this
Wow.
more, $799. It was $1,000. That's pretty good.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, right? I don't want to be a lightning rod for controversy, even though I am. I always tell people that every pit has pros and cons, right? And even something like the pits and spits, a $2,500 pit, even a hasty bake, another $2,000-3,000 pit, even the cook shacks for $4,000-5,000, Southern Pride for $10,000. They all have pros and cons, and I just kind of wanted to say that it depends on what your criteria is, right? So if you, let's say you want to have convenience, you want to have push button cell phone ability, you want the best possible result. There are many pellet cookers out there. You saw me cook with the Z Grill, the Silverback. I cooked with the Pits and Spits and Green Mountain and so on. The smoke fire, in my opinion, right, and I will tell you this, has the best result, period. You've seen the smoke ring that on my channel. You've seen the appearance. I didn't Photoshop that. That's just straight from the pit. So it's as good as my Weber Smokey Mountain without all the hassle of cleaning and setting up and running a blower on it. It's just a lot of work to run a bullet smoker. But a pellet cooker, as I get older and lazier, one button is definitely a plus. So a lot of times when I shoot my videos, right, I want to focus on the recipe. You guys have seen my hundreds of videos on how to set up a pit. So there's no need for me to every time on every video explain to you, okay, now the wood goes on and goes under, now the charcoal goes on top and grate. So you guys know all that. So what I want to try to do with my channel is focus on information that's useful to you without repetition. Cooking on a pellet cooker allows me to pop the meat right in the cooker, focus on the teaching and the cooking and the methodology, and not have to fuss over like, okay, my temps are off. I have to go fuss over the pit. And I find that the smoke fire has a few disadvantages, but in all, if I'm looking for performance, pure performance, and the best result, championship result that I would be happy to turn it into a big contest, that one is the number one.
Harry, as part of this, one question I would have is, with all the different pits out there, offset, stick burners, pellet grill, what differences in technique do you need to have when using these different cookers? Because many of us have different types of cookers. Some of us have offset, some of us have eggs, some of us have pellet. What modifications to our technique do we need to make for each of those? Is that something you can cover on?
Yeah, actually, Catherine, I took my class, right? So Catherine, you were aware that I spoke to the 3 factors of pit management and fire management control. So just let me briefly summarize it. So before I can talk about the pit, right, we need to talk a little bit about the mechanics or how does a pit work. So the basic concept behind a pit is essentially 3 things, right? You have intake, you have fuel, and you have exhaust. If I can break it down as simply as I can for you, 3 things, right? You master 3 things: intake, fuel, and exhaust. Let's talk about the intake. Intake is basically where oxygen enters your pit. And there are different configurations, different airflow configurations, and different locations of the airflow. Then you have the fuel. The fuel is a mixture of different kinds of fuel. You have pellets, you have wood, briquettes, charcoal, you have wood, and any other things like coconut charcoal and what have you, right? So you need to have an understanding of the fuel source that you have, because the fuel source accomplishes 2 very important objectives. Number 1 is the BTU. So you need BTU first. So BTU can come from electricity, right? It can come from gas, it can come from solar, it can come from any source. You need the BTU, which is British Thermal Unit. If I'm not mistaken, it's like heat 1 pound of water for 1 degree, something like that, right? But it's a measure of BTU. Second thing you need to understand is the thing called smoke, the component of smoke. And I'll talk about smoke in a second. And then the third thing is called the exhaust. So before we even talk about equipment, we have to kind of back up a little bit and ask ourselves, what is the parameters that you need to kind of finesse to create great barbecue? And it's basically the intake, the fuel, and the exhaust. Now, the next thing you're going to ask is, okay, those 3 things, right? What kind of vessel do I put it in? And I need to take you back to the day 1. Day 1 is shovel, chicken wire, hole in the ground. You guys saw my video with Tootsie, right? Tootsie Tomanes, such a charming lady, barbecue legend. I am so privileged to actually know her and then meet her in person. She's probably pushing 90 years old.
Wow.
And she's out there working as a janitor in the school district. On Friday night, she comes back from work, picks up that shovel, and goes to a barbecue restaurant in Lexington, Texas. If you've never been to Tootsie, I highly recommend you make a trip down to Texas. Even if you fly down there, drive an hour out to a place, stand in line at 4 a.m., definitely is a bucket list experience. I highly encourage all of you on this call to do that. So she basically does old school pit barbecue. Shovel, chicken wire, wood, hole in the ground, right? So basically what she does, she burns the wood in a burn pot, and she picks up the embers at the perfect moment and walks it over the hot ember thing and tosses it into the bottom of a brick offset. So that is the first kind of pit that was the original pit. Hole in the ground to brick offset. Then you have the folks that buy the metal offsets, who build the torpedo tubes, right, from the old discarded propane tanks in 250 gallon, 500 gallon, 1000 gallon, so on, right? Then you move on to the other things like, the things we use today, the boiler, the Kamado, the gravity feds, the pellet cookers, the BGEs, things like the drums, things like PBC, pit barrel cooker. So there's a whole slew of stuff that you can use, right? But even before you use a pellet cooker, you just really need to understand that those three parameters I mentioned, the intake, the fuel, and the exhaust. Those three parameters were put into different vessels. Now, all these three things, right, need to accomplish the same purpose. BTU the intake to provide oxygen. So we all are human beings, we live on Earth, we breathe oxygen. So that's the only gas that enters your pit, is your oxygen. And there's different kind of baffle configurations that allow that to happen. Like a pellet cooker has a fan. So the fan does the blowing, and the fan basically aspirates the pit to allow the oxygen level to be maintained at a sufficient level to allow for the heat to be applied, and then for the smoke to be generated, and number three, for the smoke to be circulated in the pit. So the circulation of the smoke in the pit is very important. So that's the term, it's called drafting. So as Catherine will tell you in my class, I explained to them that when you run a pit, you need to really know how to juggle those three things. The intake, the fuel, and the exhaust. Now, it's the exhaust itself, right, that generates a vacuum in the pit. And that vacuum sucks the oxygen in. So if you shut off the exhaust damper, your vacuum goes to zero. Your intake goes to zero. Does the temperature go up or down after that?
Down.
Down, right? Logically down, right? So in order for you to increase the temperature of pit, you open up your damper, the exhaust hot air leaves the pit, generates the vacuum, causes a draft, sucks the oxygen in, temperature then will climb up. Okay, that's the basics. Now, how you implement the basics on different vessels or different pits, it's really up to the design. The most basic one, like Tootsie does, is she takes the hot coals, picks it up in a shovel, and walks it over and tosses it at the bottom of a brick box, and her meat's on top. So she's cooking direct as well as indirect. Can that make sense? She's cooking direct because her meat is dripping the fat onto the fire. So you have something called the sizzling of animal fat, more technically known as the pyrolysis of animal fats. So she's got one flavor reaction going on where her meat is dripping on the fire. That's why drum smokers are so popular, because that's what happens in a drum smoker. At the same time, the grate is positioned strategically high enough at 36 inches above the embers to allow it to smoke. So she's getting direct and indirect in the same pass with one shovel. Now, that mechanism, right, is very potent, having a direct and indirect way of cooking meats. When you grill a steak, you're cooking direct. You're not cooking any indirect because there's not enough time for you to develop smoke. But good pit masters who have with one shovel, a burn pot, and some wood are able to master the direct and indirect cooking, having basically also the fat drip onto the coal, causing the fat to sizzle, and also creating additional flavors. Now, before everybody jumps on me, tells me that that's cancerous. See, the world is full of many viewpoints. So let me address that viewpoint. So you do create something called PCHs. PCH is poly something hydrocarbons, right? You guys heard that big story that having a lot of fat dripping on your fire and sizzling is not good for health. Yes, I know. However, a little bit of it goes a long way. That's why a lot of my friends who compete on the national barbecue circuit are winning, because they cook on drum smokers. And you know what happens on drum smoker, right? You put your meat, the fire is here. Guess what? The meat is dripping onto the fire, and the what do you call oil is sizzling. And that bathes the meat with the aroma of a little bit of a kind of seared oil aroma. The same kind of sensation you get when you sear a steak and you get that nice char. That's because the oil from the steak is dripping onto your fire. So that's kind of how it works.
We're not here for health. We're here for barbecue.
Okay, I will announce on this channel my big announcement. I actually am moving towards creating another channel for healthy cooking. So you know me as Slap Your Daddy for the past 12 years. I actually am working on a project now to create a companion website. I have a lot of friends. I live in California, right? So don't please forgive me for that. Okay, I lost a lot of friends in barbecue, and you know, 1 minute they're my friends, and next minute they're just gone, and they're not even 30 years old, 35 years old. Yeah. So I know that everything in life has to be done in moderation, and I love barbecue, don't get me wrong, I love meat, but I realize that there has to be a balance. You know, we can't eat barbecue for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I want to announce that I am actually going to be starting a channel that is focused on kind of what I call more healthy cooking. Some people will say it's blasphemy, but that's okay. I'm used to controversy. I'm going to be starting a new channel called Slap Your Vegan Daddy. Okay. I know you didn't hear it right. Your brain is not confused now. You didn't think you heard what Harry said. Harry said, slap your vegan daddy. Now, before you jump up and down, I'm not going to abandon Slap Your Daddy. We're going to still continue Slap Your Daddy, but I'm going to add that slowly. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to give my patrons kind of a sneak peek. So I'm going to be introducing more videos focusing on the cooking vegetables. Okay? Make sense? Hey, Winnie.
Hi, hang on, let me turn on my camera.
Yeah, give us a live feed of the LA Smokers Board with the 50,000 people eating a barbecue. Oh, wow. Okay. You have your gringo bandito hat on.
Sun.
Is that your new look? That's great.
Let's take it off. There we go. Better.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's already very hot.
Yeah, it was 100 degrees in my backyard yesterday for my class. So, and then my students, they were so interested in talking. We went until like 3:30, 4 o'clock. So
oh, wow.
Sweltering day. So this is how the site looks like?
Yes. So I got a booth for the smoker. And then we have the booth for food service.
Oh, so Dragon has got her own space.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes. So
what are you
more
serving?
for show. It's more for show, right? To see the
Absolutely,
smoke.
yeah. You gotta have that big pit. You know, you're a legit pitmaster, right? Don't do like Harry walking around with his little Weber Smokey Mountain.
And your garage filled of trophies. I have none. So
I should bring some trophies and just for kicks and giggles. Would it allow me to bring a trophy in and then give you a few props? You know, I'll just tear out the tag and.
No, I don't. It's not mine. I don't want to use as prop and.
No, I'll do what do you call my Dragon Patreon as the new tag here.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's true, right? You're my Patreon with the Dragon. So that's the only one that I know that you know as a fifth. I don't know how many are patrons. I don't even know if any patrons have a 500-gallon offset like yours. I'm not sure.
Probably
I should
not.
do a poll. I should do a poll. Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Look at these vendors. They're just because we open at 10, so they're all done setting up.
Yeah.
Let me show you. Look, there's a conga line right now.
Oh wow! You can even do the conga while you.
They're just having fun. It's a lot of fun out here. It's a lot of hard work, but mostly it's a lot of fun, a lot of happy people. So
how many briskets did you make for the event?
30.
Holy moly, 30.
It's on. It's on. Yeah, it's on. Both are on. I checked.
I better get there soon because the 30 will sell out in, let's see, how fast, how many slices do you have? Just one or two people slicing?
Oh, I have 2 people slicing.
Okay, so 30 briskets will go in probably what, 2 hours?
I hope not, because I have ribs. Well, actually I do, because then we can relax for the rest of the day.
You opened to 4 o'clock, right? So what happened the last time you were there? Did you sell out at all earlier?
We sold out of brisket and ribs around 1 o'clock, and we just had the pork belly left. So everybody just left to the next line because they wanted brisket.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Who else is doing
this
brisket
time-
besides you?
Today I think there's another guy called A's Barbecue, and it's more like Mexican fusion, Chicano barbecue. And then there's, let me show you right now. Oops.
So folks, you guys are getting a live feed of this massive event that Venus had.
So this is the Ugly Drum. And he basically takes the brisket, brines it, and smokes it, and serves it in a sandwich. This is probably agua fresca. This is coffee. Then there's plant-based meats. There's a lot of cool vendors here. I don't know what this one is. Looks like burritos. Fish cake. Oh, Caribbean style. And then this is like slushies. There's a bunch of stuff.
So
You won't
I'll
go
be there momentarily, Winnie. So I'll go and shoot a little promo for you, and then do a little review of the site and try to post on YouTube later tonight. And I was going to cover with my patrons this morning, kind of like the pros and cons of different pits, right? So since you are the draw gun expert, right? I know that a lot of people are very interested in offset smokers.
Yes.
Maybe I can have you speak a little bit to kind of what the pros and cons that you noticed, because I know you started kind of on Traeger, right? You tried out Traeger?
Yes.
And then you kind of decided Traeger is not it. no offense to Traeger, okay? So if Traeger's watching, please, I'm not, saying Traeger is bad. But why don't you just tell all the patrons who are on the call, what was your motivation? Because I think that people may be on the same path. They cook with a pellet smoker and they realize that they want something more.
So pellet is great because it's automatic. You set it, forget it. But if you don't have electricity, then you're screwed, because you might be mid-smoke and then you wake up and then your the meat's spoiled, Another thing is the convection fan, which is good and bad. It's good when you don't have a lot of meat on there, but when you try to fill it up with meat, like I have a 32-inch Traeger. No, the biggest one, I think 42-inch. Or whatever, but I used to do 3 briskets in there, and if they're really big, the airflow is not great, and then the edges would get burnt, and then it just doesn't. It's just not something you can scale. It's not made to be filled to the brim, so that's one thing I don't like about it. And then
how many can you cook? How many can you cook well on a Traeger? Because I know people ask that question, right? Because so it's true you cannot scale. What is the optimum number? Can you just one, maybe
so
2?
I would say 12 pounders, 3 of them.
That's it, maximum.
If you go any bigger, it's not good. You don't get the good smoke ring. You don't get the bark. The bark is terrible. And then the edges are all burnt and dried out. So with the offset, it's big, but not just that. I think like you really get the smoke flavor. Oh, you know what? We have to take the group shot right now.
Okay.
Before we open.
You put it in 30 minutes, right?
10. Yeah, we got to get a group photo.
Okay.
Right now.
All right. Well, you can rejoin when you can, and
okay.
I'll be there this morning, and then if I get late, save me some brisket, okay, please.
I will.
Let's sell it all. I need a platter, because every time we cook together, Winnie, in our collabs, I never get to see all your food. I get to see like small little teaser bits, right?
Yeah.
And what I want to try to do is shoot a feature for you, kind of like showing your whole plate, kind of like everything that you produce. So if you can save me some of that, I'll try to get there. My daughter's driving from San Diego, so I was going to drag my daughter to take her with me. So I'm just waiting for her to arrive.
Okay.
All right, Winnie, thanks for joining the call.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's gonna come soon.
Oh, sweet.
Okay.
Harry, just to clarify, when I was asking before about the differences, I mean, yes, touching on the differences in the technology is important. I was more referring to specific differences with the food. So for example, like if you have a pit soaker, you want to pay attention to this while you're cooking. That's the question I was asking.
Okay, so you're talking about cooking different kinds of meats with different durations on the pit.
Well, I mean, for example, if let's say I have a pellet smoker and you have a big green egg, you know, the rub is the same, trimming the meat's the same, but when you're on the cooker, when you're actually doing your cook, do you have to pay attention to different things based on different, for example, do you want to make certain the meat's further away from where the heat source is? Do you want to pay attention to spritzing more off, that sort of thing?
Okay, so going back to what I was saying, that it has to do with the intake, the draft, and the fire, the amount of fire and the exhaust, right? So you're controlling something called hot air in the pit. The hot air is important because when you cook barbecue, you need BTU and smoke. BTU is just pure heat. The heat can come from any source. It can come from solar, come from electricity, come from gas. So that's a heat component. If you use something like pellets, pellets provide BTU. They also provide smoke. So as a pitmaster, it's vitally important you understand smoke. Smoke comes from wood. And wood is made up of essentially three important organic compounds. The first one is called cellulose. Second one is called hemicellulose. And the third one is called lignin. Lignin is the hard resin within a tree or plant that makes it hard. So when you touch a leaf is made out of cellulose and hemicellulose. It's soft. When you touch a branch and you wonder why is the branch hard when the leaf is soft, that's because the branch or the trunk has a third component called lignin. Lignin is one of the most complex organic substances in nature. There are many kinds of trees and lignin which produces softwoods and hardwoods. You typically cannot smoke with a softwood. So you wouldn't take pine and try to use pine and cook barbecue because you're not going to be able to generate the proper amount of lignin, the right kind of lignin. So back to your question, right now that you understand what I just described, cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin, that is manifested into things like briquettes. Where the briquette is burnt down to charcoal, is manifested in lump charcoal, manifested in wood pellets. And then of course there's regular wood. And then there's the people who use the gas assist or electric assist and they throw a piece of wood to smolder. So that's the kind of the chemical basis of cooking great barbecue. Now, coming back to your question about the green egg, you have to know how to manipulate your green egg or Kamado, Primo brand you have to, number one, generate adequate BTU, generate adequate airflow. What you will notice with the Kamado is that you usually have to crack open the intake, right? Just a little bit. What is the width of the intake that you crack open, Mark, on yours? Half an inch.
I have a pellet smoker, so I don't.
Okay. All right, so let me tell you what it is. So if you are a pellet cooker, I'm sorry, you are a ceramic person. I didn't want to use green egg because people get offended. Oh, Catherine has a question. She's waving her hand. You have a BGE?
Kamado.
Kamado. Okay, yeah. Because
you know, I do too, but I don't use it anymore. I have a Kamado Joe and but the big difference that I have between the egg or the Kamado and my issue with the pellet grills is that the pellet grills seem to dry things out more, and the food's moisture inside the Kamado or my drum. I use my drum a lot more now for certain foods, and it was really bad when I had a Traeger, which I got rid of, but I still have that issue with the Mac, and so I don't do things like ribs on the Macs. They dry out too much.
Okay, so we're getting close to the kind of the main points, right? The main points is that back to what I said, the draft. So you need to understand BTU, smoke, and draft. These three are interrelated. Every pit does it differently. Okay, so let me explain. When I cook on my Kamado, I prefer to cook butts in it. I will never cook a brisket in my Kamado. Did I just say that? I just canceled my sponsorship. I better not edit this video. The BG people will be upset. I cooked the big green egg event in San Diego. So I have a lot of friends that sell BG. So I just want to be clear, right? Harry Soo prefers to cook meats that benefit from a moist environment on a BGE and a Kamado, right? Now, here's why. When you set up a Kamado, you will notice that the opening damper to run about 250, 225, you got to open it only about quarter to half inch. That is not enough intake of oxygen and air to generate what I call a draft. So you're getting BTU because the ceramic is very insulated. You use very little fuel, so it's very efficient. So BTU, it produces maximum amount of BTU. Great for doing pizzas. But when you're cooking low and slow, that stagnant air is problematic. It's good for pork butt because pork butt seems to benefit from moist environment. But if you cook a brisket and ribs, you need for the meat to dry out quickly. Catherine has a question.
All right, I have a question. I have the Big Joe Kamado grill with the extra attachment. What is it called? The slow roller. Are you familiar with that attachment for Kamados?
No, let us know what a slow roller does.
Okay, it's a attachment that creates, I guess, a vacuum that brings the smoke constantly, like a convection oven would with heat. That's
Is
what
it a blower? Is electrical device or what?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, there are attachments to blow, but this one is not. It's all done by the wood and charcoal you have in the pit. And this puts a barrier, like a shield, between the whatever product you have on the grill and the heat source, and it rolls around it. I have successfully cooked briskets, chicken and ribs in it with this device, and I think it works really, really well. But I have a question. I have two questions, but first I'll get to smoke. So I know how to manage my heat, my fuel, my intake, and my exhaust. What about smoke? Is there a method or a chronology about the color of the smoke that's being emitted from the pit of when you put your product in?
Okay,
Is it
smoke and colors
or white?
Okay. Yeah, so let me talk about smoke for a second, and then let me just finish the thought with Mark on the pros and cons between a Kamado and a pellet cooker. You already kind of got the hint of what everybody's saying, Mark. The fan is a bonus. The fan is also a boon, right? It's a problem. And depending on the design of the pellet cooker, the fan is too aggressive. So a lot of new manufacturers today, they use a technique called VFD. VFD means variable frequency fan. So the fan is not like on and off and on and off, right? The fan has a variable speed. So the newer ones have a VFD built into the PID controller so that you can moderate the fan. So let's say if the pit wants to get up to temp, right? The PID tells the pit, hey, you are down to 100 degrees, get your act together, blow air, get a lot of pellets burning and get the temperature up. And then once it reaches temperature, then the fan intensity is reduced. So these algorithms are very complex, and I've been talking to people like Weber, try to help them, kind of fine tune their product, because a VFD is actually necessary if you're going to be a pellet designer, and that overcomes that problem of the thing burning. The point that Winnie brought up about the fan causing a problem and cooking the brisket, kind of cooking too much on the edges, that is just a flaw of the aerodynamic of the pit. That's why you notice, right? Every single pellet cooker has a long, deep metal pan, a drip tray. That is a flawed approach. Why? Because it doesn't generate airflow. Weber decided to use flavorizers. So for those of you who are not aware what flavorizers are, they're just the flavorizer, but it's the V, it's just a fancy name for a V, shield that you put on to allow more air to circulate. That's why you notice when I cook on the smoke fire, my smoke ring is really unreal. It's just beautiful. That's because the air is blowing and circulating over the pit very much like an offset without causing it to dry out. Because when that pan is there, the air can only go on the side and the back and the front. So it's not really circulating. So the Catherine brought out a very good one. I'm looking at the image of the Kamado Joe slow roller. So the slow roller, right, is kind of the Kamado's way of doing that flavorizer bars that Weber did. So it's kind of analogous. So the slow roller, I can suspect, because I actually use it in Fargo. I just didn't know what it was called. So when I was in Fargo and they were giving us all the equipment, I had no idea how to use the equipment, but luckily some of the Shields associates, they were used to selling that stuff. So they had that slow roller device in the pit. And I asked a lot of questions like, oh, this is pretty cool. I don't know what is it, but let's try it out and see on the brisket. And it does work because it does the same thing. It kind of
Yeah,
causes
yeah.
convection.
Mhm.
For those of you who are aware, you know, there's a company that sells that vortex. Who's the company that sells the vortex thing that goes into the Weber Smokey Mountain? Forgot the name, but it's a company that sells a kind of a vortex thingy that you put on. You replace the fire grate on your Weber Smokey Mountain with that vortex thing, and it causes the air to circulate to get better airflow. So I think
that's the Hunsaker. That's the Hunsaker.
the Hunsaker, yes. What is it called?
Because that's my drum. But I have a question for you on how to operate that in a second.
Okay, cool. So let's hold that question on the vortex so I can finish this thought. So so that answer kind of takes care of your question, Mark, that if you have a pellet cooker, you just have to play around with it to make sure that the draft is sufficient, but not too strong to dry out your meat. Now, how do you do that? Let me explain. On every pellet cooker, right, there are sweet spots. Remember I showed you the tortilla test, where you put the tortillas on it to see which one works well. You can do that test, right, to find where the sweet spots are. Like even in Winnie's pit, Winnie bought a 500-gallon pit, but her cooking area is only like about half. So, because only half of it is in the sweet spot. If you notice in the videos we see, right, when she tosses the briskets and butts onto the pit, notice where she puts it. She puts it right 1/3 in from the firebox. So that first area, 1/3 is not good enough for cooking briskets. Okay, so if we want to cook something hot, we'll throw it there. But you notice she puts her meat kind of to 1/3 in and towards the chimney stack. So these are things that even she has to do, even though she bought a really expensive pit. So if we are cooking on your pellet cooker, Mark, I recommend you try different placements. Now, don't forget, there's a very important placement in the pellet cooker, which is on top. You remember we have a shelf, right? If you don't have a shelf, go buy the RegTech shelf, because I have a RegTech shelf because I had the same problem with my pellet cookers. My GMG sometimes doesn't run right. I found out that that RegTech stainless steel shelf put into the pellet cooker with my meat on top overcomes that problem. The other tip I want to give you also is that
Is that the shelf that they normally bolt on the front of the RegTech?
No, the shelf that goes in the pit. No, I'm not.
Okay, because I have a RegTech, so I'm like,
yeah, okay. Yeah, so there's a cooking shelf you can put in. So the way you want to do it is you can experiment putting a cooking shelf in there, putting meat on the cooking shelf. The other tip I want to give you is put a water pan, put a foil pan underneath that rack and put either liquid or in it. That helps. So a lot of times you have to tame the airflow. So because you are, again, manipulating three things, right? Making the BTU, your heat, you're making the smoke, you're making the draft. So if you know how to tune those three things, right? You can cook with a shovel, or you can cook with a Traeger, you can cook with a Kamado, you can pretty much cook with everything. But you need to understand these three fundamental principles of how to run a pit to get maximum flavor, because you need the smoke. Without the smoke, nothing's going to happen, right? So that answers your question. Let me go to Catherine. Catherine asked about the smoke. So let me talk about that for a second. So it's a good segue, Catherine. Thanks for providing kind of the segue. You're like my Ed McMahon. People don't even know what I'm talking about, who Ed McMahon is, but they don't even know who Johnny Carson is, right? So I did myself, okay? So let's talk a little about smoke, right? So I told you BTU. BTU is clear. You can get BTU from electricity, gas, solar, whatever you. So you need BTU. Let's talk about smoke. Without smoke, barbecue cannot happen. And I talked earlier about the lignin. So let me go back to lignin. Lignin is one of the most complex resins on earth, created by Mother Nature. And every hardwood has a different lignin. I'm going to ignore softwood because softwood is another hour discussion. But let's talk about hardwoods. When you go to buy wood, right, you have to buy wood without bark, because all you're interested is in that hard core of the wood. You need to know how to perform the evaporation of the resin. So the evaporation of the resin, there is a technical term, it's called a pyrolysis. So you need to know how to smolder that resin so that it emits certain gases. That is a secret to barbecue. So if you take a piece of hardwood chunk, like a piece of hickory, a piece of pecan, a piece of apple, and you put it on a hot plate, and you heat the hot plate up. At around 450 degrees, that resin will begin to evaporate. The technical term is called pyrolysis. At around 450, which you will easy to remember because you remember Fahrenheit 451. Remember, there's a book. Okay, maybe remember what that's about, right? That's a famous book called Fahrenheit 451. So I'm saying that so you will never forget it. After this call, you're going to remember Fahrenheit 451 for the rest of your life. Okay, Fahrenheit 451 is important because that is the milestone where the first chemical reaction happens. The lignin will evaporate into a range of chemicals called carbenols. So if I put a white towel into the pit, right? That white towel will be coated with a brown substance. That's carbonol. Then if I take my finger and I swipe the white towel and I taste it, I'm going to taste barbecue. So as a pitmaster, you need to know how to generate that carbonol at 450. So that's the first milestone you need to know. The second milestone you need to know is that between 450 all the way to 750 degrees, there's a whole bunch of other chemicals that produce the magic of barbecue. But another milestone event happens at 720-ish. The pit produces something called phenols. So have you ever used, has anybody on this call ever cooked mesquite? Anybody mesquite, right? Okay, it's got a very kerosene twang. It's as if a jet engine at the airport turned and then the jet exhaust hit your face and you get a kerosene twang. Okay, some people love that, right? Some people love that kerosene twang, but I'm not a fan. When I cook mesquite, I just use mesquite to grill lobster. So like this weekend, I think my daughter wants some lobster. So I'm gonna go cook some lobster. I'm gonna find some mesquite and grill some lobsters over mesquite, because mesquite and a kerosene twang seems to work well for seafood. That's my opinion. Now, there's a myth out there. I want to dispel it right now, and I'm going to cause another Jerry Springer fist fight and 3-hour argument. A lot of people in Texas say, "Oh yeah, I'm a Texas pitmaster, and I cook with mesquite, and I create the world's best brisket." They lie. Okay, they don't cook a brisket for 10 hours with mesquite. They may throw one log of mesquite in the beginning, okay, but for the next 10 hours of the cook, they're using post oak or pecan or something a little bit milder. Because anybody on this call who's ever cooked brisket with mesquite for 13 hours, you know it's not edible. So the idea is that wood is very important because every wood produces phenols. So if you ever put on aftershave or deodorant or perfume, that's called phenols, aromatic compounds that are available in the pit when you pyrolyze the lignin. Now, the phenols come in many different forms. That's why there's so many kinds of wood. If you want to cook pork, right, you use peach wood. It works really, really well. Like when I cook chicken now, my fave now is live coastal oak, which is the red oak, the same oak that's used to cook tri-tip. I'm really enjoying that on chicken. Sometimes I add a little bit of citrus wood to it. And when I cook briskets, I prefer to use a combination of hickory and apple. Hickory has a very strong smoke because the phenols that it produces kind of very strong smoky flavor. Then the apple is a nice balance. So I use a 50-50 hickory and apple blend when I cook my brisket. When I cook ribs, I like to use a cherry pecan blend. So these are all things that I've developed over the years, because when you cook with the food and you understand the underlying science behind the chemical reactions that are happening in your pit, you are much better off able to produce the result that you are shooting for. Now, I'm a competitor, so I'm shooting for a very, very high bar. So what I'm doing right now, what I'm explaining to you may not fully be applicable, but I just want to kind of give you all the black belt stuff that so you can equip yourself with all the things you need in your toolkit to get to the result you want. Now, when you cook with barbecue, right, you have to remember the carbanols and the phenol gases coming from your pit. They are actually colorless. I'll say that again so it sinks in the enormity of just what I just said. The carbanols and the phenols that provide the bulk of the heavy lifting for you to create world-class barbecue, those gases are colorless. So when you look at a pit and the pit is being run properly by a seasoned pitmaster, there is no smoke. So when you go to a contest, don't take my word for it, just go to a contest. You look at the pro teams and you look at the beginner teams. You will notice that the booths that have belching black smoke, or belching white smoke, you walk up and you talk to those people, you will notice they're all beginners because the pros know better. Now, they cannot explain it the way I've explained it in terms of the science, the food chemistry that happens behind the lignin and the food and the reaction with the BTU, but they know instinctively. When you go to look at Tootsie, just give you an example. You've seen my videos on Tootsie, right? You notice how she burns the wood in the burn pot. She waits until the wood burns completely down. Then she takes her shovel and shovels that ember and walks over and dumps it underneath the food. Why did she do that? Why didn't she just throw the wood into the pit? That's because she knows instinctively that she's got to burn the wood down to the point where it's producing the BTU and sufficient of the carbonol and phenols that when she puts the thing in the pit, it will provide this proper amount of smoke without overdoing it. Yeah, Armin.
So how do you do that without an offset, right? In terms of where it's loaded, like in a Kamado or a drum?
Yeah, you depend on the design of the equipment, right? So like a Kamado is designed to burn basically lumps charcoal.
Right.
And I've taught you
I
guys
have the
many
same
times.
question.
then the
See-
way
No,
you
go ahead,
handle a Kamado is that you need to be able to manage the BTU
Mhm.
and you need to manage the smoke. So that's why I teach you guys to put your wood chunks underneath your wood, because does anybody know the temperature of fire? It's 900 to 1400 degrees, depending on the wood and charcoal you use. So those temperatures are no good for barbecue in terms of producing smoke. They're only good for BTU. So if you do not know how to pyrolyze or evaporate your resin between 450 and 720, you cannot create barbecue. Does this make sense? So you need to know how to do that. Now, when you throw a chunk of wood on the 900-degree fire on the top, you're burning the wood. All you're doing is just creating a class of compounds that you don't need. You're wasting your time doing that. That's why when I tell people to put the wood underneath the charcoal, they are very skeptical at first. But they try it and it works, but they never understand what is it, because I didn't reveal that on my YouTube channel, but I'm telling you guys because you guys are my patrons, and I need to teach you guys all of the depth. When I speak, right, I'm speaking only the tip of the iceberg. So on YouTube, you get the tip of the iceberg, but you guys are my patron, you're getting the entire 7/8 of the knowledge base behind that. Because when I do things, I'm a very anal retentive person. I don't do things because I do it. I need to know why. It drives people crazy. It drives me crazy. So I'm pretty OCD about things like that. I need to know why. So when I cook barbecue, right, there is a method to my man. So when I show you something in 10 seconds, you may not be aware that 10,000 hours went behind what I just showed you in 10 seconds, but it allows you to get the results you want. And I never really explain what's happening behind the scenes, you know, and I try to do that in class. It takes, you know, captions in my class, it takes 6 hours for me to tell all these things. and on an 8-minute YouTube video, I can only speak that fast. So you need to know that you need to pyrolyze the lignin, regardless of your pit, regardless of your configuration, whether you have a fan or you don't have a fan. Now, the nice thing about an offset like Winnie is that if you guys look at the offset, pay careful attention. The stack, the length of the chimney and the length of the cooking chamber, the torpedo tube and the chimney is always the same. It's 3-to-1 ratio. Why is that? Why is the bore always a 6-inch, 8-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, or 10-inch, depending on the size? On a 250-gallon, you get a 6-inch bore on the chimney. On a 500-gallon, you likely get an 8 to 10, and then on a 1,000-gallon, you could get a 10 and a 12-inch bore. And you notice how, like for example, certain pits, right, like Mobergs, the Mobergs have a Dr. Seuss kind of a approach, right? Have you seen that, like Dr. Seuss? You know, the funnel is a big thing. It goes to the smaller bore and the smaller bore, and it goes up the roof. And if you look carefully at all the offsets, it's a 3-to-1 ratio. Why? Because that is the perfect thermodynamics for getting that draft to circulate over your food. And they know that when they build the pit, and they took literally decades of practice and trial and error, how to build the pit so that the smokestack has the proper vacuum draw, and then the collector at the end of the pit. So if we look at the different kinds of offsets, some collectors are triangle, some collectors are what I call the Dr. Seuss, you know, the big bore and then going to the small bore. And that is a whole separate topic on itself. You guys saw me cook on Franklin's pit, right? In Jeremy Yoda's backyard. And you guys saw how the fact that for $4,000, you get no dampers. Which I thought was like, wow, man, okay, that's a pretty stiff price to pay for a laser cut door that has the word Franklin. You know, Aaron's my buddy and I love him to death. But I have to tell you, wow, I wish I had thought of that. I'll put something slap your daddy, right? $4,000. No dampers on the intake or the exhaust. So you can tell, right? Even Jeremy Yoda, who's a seasoned pitmaster, even I was there, we were struggling to keep the temperature going smoothly.
Wow.
So I don't know how a beginner would be able to use his $4,000 Franklin offset. Honestly, I do not know. I suspect that the philosophy was very close to that of pit barrel cooker. You know pit barrel cooker? It's just a barrel, but there's no adjustment. You just throw the fuel in there and you just run it. It just runs fine. So a pit barrel cooker is more predictable because you can decide the fuel, the firebox is the same. But when you're cooking an offset, right? You saw Jeremy and me chopping wood, right? You're teaching me how to chop wood. And even the length of the wood, the diameter of that chunk of wood, how you place it matters a lot in the airflow. So I cannot imagine a beginner being able to master all of that without a lot of instruction. And Jeremy told me he spent hours trying different logs, different sizes of woods and all. Now,
Yeah.
what has all this got to do with this conversation is that once you understand the BTU, you understand the lignin and smoke, and you understand the convection current, you can master any pit. That's the secret. So once you understand these three key concepts I'm teaching you today, which I never have time to go through in my videos, but I just want to tell you in kind of a lengthy session here. Once you master these three, regardless of whether you use a shovel, you use a Traeger, you use a Kamado, right? You use a, green egg, you use a pit barrel, you use a UDS, you use a gravity fed, you use a Southern Pride, Old Hickory, you can master barbecue because you understand the science behind, combined with the art form needed to create championship results. Sound cool? Okay.
Mhm.
Really quick, Harry, to add on to what Rick was saying about wood, how much of the wood is really sacrificed when say Tootsie burns it before putting it in? Is it only like 50% usable, every piece of wood? And then also, do you recommend pre-burning wood if you're cooking on a Smoky Mountain at all?
Okay. The second question,
maybe you have the rest. Maybe you should clear your schedule for the day to explain this. I'm sorry.
okay, the second question is easy. The answer is no. Use the pit the way it was designed. The Weber Smokey Mountain was designed to use briquettes. And the enhancement I have is that you cannot control the lignin and the smoke in your briquette. So buy a neutral but great tasting charcoal like Jealous Devil and put the wood under. So that's the easy question. The first question is, how much does it burn down? If you've been to Texas, postal grows everywhere. It's almost free. We in SoCal have to pay a lot of money for wood. So if the wood is free, I'm not sure that people in Texas really care how much it burns down to. The key to ask yourself is visually, how should the embers look? So let me just rephrase your question, right? So visually, how do you determine when the wood is ready to be put under your pit? I noticed what Tootsie does is she has a burn pot. For those of you not aware what a burn pot is, it's just a barrel. It's just a barrel with grate, and then you throw the wood on top, right? So the wood will burn, and then all these embers will fall through the grate and then fall into a little, the bottom of the burn barrel. And then you scoop it up, and then you use that ember. She waits until it burns down to essentially the reddish, orangey, glowing coals. That's what she does. So once at a point in time, it kind of converts to charcoal. That's why people buy charcoal, because that's kind of what charcoal is. You heat the wood, right, until everything evaporates, and then you have the black charcoal left behind. So essentially what Tootsie is doing in the burn pot, she's making her own charcoal, which you will see me in Bora Bora. I have a trip coming up to do my bucket list. I'm going to cook a steak in Bora Bora. I'm going to try to figure out how to make coconut charcoal in Bora Bora and then cook my steak in about 6 inches of water with my adult beverage. So that's coming up. I'm glad you reminded me. Okay. Does that answer your question about the two questions you had, Armin?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, next question.
So Harry, related to this, so on my drum as opposed to the Kamado, I guess I never know how much I should be controlling off the bottom intake versus off the top damper, the airflow. And then the other part of that is no matter which of these things I use, while I can get kind of as good a smoke ring as an offset, I really don't get as much kind of that smoke flavor, which seems to be somehow the draft's not the same as in these cookers that I had, the home cookers, a pellet cooker or a drum or a Kamado with an offset. So how do you get closer to an offset flavor is what I guess I'm asking.
Okay, so that's a very complicated question. Okay. So let me see if I can break it down as fast as I can. Number one, what kind of drum do you have?
I have a Hunsaker.
Hunsaker, you using the Vortex?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Hunsaker is the one with the two tubes. Oh, is that one?
No, that's the Gateway. It's the a Hunsaker's got the center intake below the charcoal basket, which has the Vortex on top of it, and then it's got a single offset.
Okay, yeah, okay, I remember now. I got a picture. So a lot of my friends who cook the Hunsaker, they win world champions. so it's not the pit. All right, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, Rick. A little bit of tough love to you. It's not your Hunsaker. That's the problem. Okay. Coming back to the Hunsaker, I'm not a Hunsaker expert. So I won't claim to know how to tweak a Hunsaker to achieve the world-class results that some of my friends who cook a Hunsaker do. So I have to admit that up front, right? But looking at a Hunsaker, it's got basically one chimney onto the side, right? And you have your intake damper. and then you have your vortex in there that's supposed to swirl the air. So the specific problem you are having with the Hunsaker is you're saying that it doesn't have the right flavor. Is that what the first problem you have is the flavor? Is that right?
It doesn't get as smoky on the ribs. I mean, it's my best thing for cooking ribs, but it doesn't quite get as smoky. And I mean, it's similar to a pit barrel cooker. I think better than a pit barrel cooker.
All right, let me trace you back to what I just taught you. So I'm going to quiz you now, right? So what provides the flavor to your rib?
Well, the wood, the ligands in the wood largely, and also the hot air over the charcoal.
And what are you using?
The drippings of the meat on the charcoal also.
Cool. What are you using in terms of the wood in your Hunsaker?
I use the cherry chunks for mainly color. My color really improved when I use cherry, and then I use hickory chunks. And I don't use I use whatever they have, barbecue galore or something for the wood. Okay,
so you are actually diagnosing and troubleshooting your own problem, right? So number one, if you're not getting the smoke flavor you want, you understand lignin now. I explained it. Right. So now your job is to go back to the drawing board and figure out, right, what lignin should you prioritize at the proper temperature with the wood underneath your chunks at 450 to 720 degrees to emit the right carbonyls and phenols to bathe your ribs into that flavor profile that you seek. I've given you the process for you to reach your solution. Make sense?
So experiment with how much wood.
So you're not getting enough smoke, right? You're not getting enough smoke, right? It could be a couple of different factors. Your charcoal is corrupting the smoke. That's one possibility. So my recommendation, we switch to a neutral charcoal. That's why I use Jealous Devil, because it takes on any flavor I want. I want, citrus, it'll do citrus. When I was using Kingsford before, Kingsford is just super overpowering. When you use Kingsford, right, there's no way to introduce any other smoke flavor. Yeah. Kingsford is like completely dousing your ribs with that Kingsford flavor. If you like the Kingsford flavor, it's great. But when you get to a level where you want a little bit of nuance in your barbecue, you have to apply these techniques that I'm teaching you. So you can, number one, get the smoke flavor you want, you need to get the right lignin in your pit. You need to prioritize the lignin in the proper way in a sufficient amount. So let's say you decide you want to use a cherry and pecan, right? You say that, okay, I like the cherry flavor, I like the cherry color, but I want a little bit more smoke. You add the hickory. Hickory is not enough. You add more chunks of hickory. So you need to be able to tune your number of chunks. If you're using like a lump charcoal, and then if you buy a regular, I don't hate to say it, but if you buy like Royal Oak and all, it's really another parameter that you have no control over because it's very strong. So you gotta like play with basically your wood and your charcoal. I recommend if you want to like debug your flavor profile, go back to a neutral charcoal, introduce the elements of wood one at a time, understand the flavor, and see how much of that number of wood chunks will give you the flavor you want. Then you move to the third stage, which is blending them. You're doing all this together, right? And then you're not getting the results you want. So my recommendation is like when I debug a piece of software, I don't try to debug the software. I break the software down to the basic minimum and I test one module at a time. And if that module works, I'll move to the next one. Then when everything works, I'll put them all together. That's called a systems test. So
I need to cook more with more types of charcoal till I figure out which works.
Well, cook with charcoal first. Don't put any wood. Just run the charcoal, run your Kingsford, run your Royal Oak, run your Jealous Devil, run your Fogos, and then you just say, hey, I know how Fogo tastes. I know how Jealous Devil tastes. And don't even put any seasoning on your pork. Just throw, pork is cheap. So to be honest, I practice with pork. So I just buy a pork butt. And a pork butt is $1.98 a pound. You just cut it up into pieces and just cook it, and then that way you can really know. What you don't see on my channel is the thousands of hours that went behind all these experiments. You don't see that. You only see an 8-minute video of the result. I could have spent 80 hours behind the scenes tweaking all these things. So there is no shortcut. I'm sorry, Rick, to burst your bubble. Okay.
All right.
LeBron shoots 10,000 free throws, okay? So you got to shoot your 10,000 free throws. So you got to play with wood to try to get to the flavor profile that you like.
Okay. All right. Well, I hadn't thought of playing with the charcoal piece, so I haven't.
No, absolutely. These all the parameters that I taught you today, right? You got to know. And again, back to basics, right? I want to make sure everybody on this call understands what I'm trying to impart to you. You got to know, right? Your lignin. You got to know your lignin. You got to know your BTU. You got to know your draft. Those are the three. Right? If I say too much today, you just go away today with just three things: the draft, the lignin, and the BTU. That is what you need to know. All right, Catherine has a question.
Yes. Using Tootsie's principle, of burning the wood till it becomes embers and then transferring it in her pit, yes?
That's
Okay.
her method. Yeah, that's called pit barbecue. That's how barbecue started. Until everybody invented Traegers and Kamados and everything else. That's how barbecue started.
So using that principle, should I be, and what the big thing I think, and I think I told you this at your class that I attended in July, what the big thing I took away from the class was your explanation of where to place the wood chunks underneath the charcoal. I didn't know that because before I found you, Harry, I was watching videos from Kamado, and their chef just threw the wood chunks on top of the charcoal. So you going back to my analogy from listening to this today, I should be letting the charcoal turn into embers before I start a cook. Is that correct?
Okay, so let me back up. Again, remember I said earlier about the pit design itself, right? So the expectation of the designer of the Kamado is that they don't need you to do that. What the method that Tutsi uses, right, is the traditional method when barbecue was started in America. And you know that it was popularized by a lot of the German immigrants who came to America, set up in Texas, and they were butchers. And then they had excess meat. And they started to basically, before the meat went bad, they would cook it and try to sell it. And then use butcher paper, which is to be able to wrap it. Barbecue also has a earlier roots into the slave owners, part of American history, where the lesser cuts of the meats were given to the slave workers, and then they would have to put the meat aside to cook for long periods where they go work the field. So that when they come back at the end of the day, their little kids were watching the fire, and then they got the food to cook. And then the food became so good that now the plantation owners now wanted to eat that food. So that's a little bit of history of American barbecue. So the Tutsi's method is traditional barbecue. The expectation that most people do, especially Kamado, they know people who won't do that. So what they do is they build a Kamado, which is a ceramic cooker, which is not their idea. They stole it from Japan. That's why it's called Kamado. So the Kamado idea came from Japan and Asia. So they adopted it, and they didn't. I don't even think that maybe they don't even know the mechanics and the science that goes behind cooking barbecue in terms of the BTU, the lignin, and the trap, right? But they try to design a Kamado to accomplish the same purpose, provided you put the wood underneath the charcoal. I bet you a lot of the Kamado chefs themselves, right? This conversation we are having, right? Not many people in the world know. So you guys are very privileged because I'm sharing you the secrets to my success. I didn't win first place USA by accident, even though it seems like, it's like Harry does things willy-nilly. I don't really do things willy-nilly because I'm very lazy and cheap. Okay, or process efficient and cost efficient. I don't do things if it costs money or it wastes my time. So I really want to get the best possible results in the shortest amount of time with the less cost involved. So to answer your question, Karen, you don't need to do all those things to do the burn pot because the burn pot is known as pit barbecue. When you're cooking on a Kamado, right? You're cooking on a Kamado barbecue. All you need to do is put the wood chunks underneath your coals and cook it that way. Now, I recommend people don't believe a single word I said. You try with the chunks on top. You cook a couple of times, and you try another time with the chunks at the bottom. And you, Catherine, you will tell me whether what I say is accurate or not. Because I always tell people, right? Don't listen to
I know what you're saying is accurate because I've tried it both ways.
Oh, you tried it? Okay, cool. So share the results with everybody listening so that they can get your experience.
Yeah, well, it's just a world of difference. It's completely different. And
now you didn't know the carbanols and the phenol reason before the
no, Kamado did not give you that kind of information that you do, Harry. But it made sense to me once I saw and heard you talk about it that, oh, okay, well, there's no point in wasting that wood on the top. It's just going to incinerate, put it underneath, and it will smoke. So, but my question goes to if you just do that and you light it, you don't immediately put the product in the pit, do you? Don't you?
Yeah, I don't have time to wait. So you notice that when we put the wood, right, and then you put the charcoal on top, right, there's at least 3 inches or more of unburned charcoal. Am I correct? So when you throw the hot coals to start your pit according to the minion method, right, you throw in the middle, that hot coal will burn outwards over the next 6 to 10 hours. Mm-hmm. So at that point in time, right, if you time it correctly, you put some of the chunks around the edge of the fire ring, and you put some in the middle. The one in the middle will light in a little while, and then you have about 8 chunks around the 8 that will smolder over the next 6 to 8 hours. That's how you get the kind of a smoke ring and the kind of flavor that I've shown you guys. So it's all about good science and good art form combined. In barbecue, you cannot succeed just learning science. You need to have art and you need to merge the two. And that's really kind of what I'm trying to teach everyone, is that you need to know both. Now, a lot of people that I know who are quote unquote professional instructors and they represent certain brands, they don't know this stuff. I can tell you, right, when I was in Weber as an instructor and I taught all the Weber engineers, all the Weber chefs, this thing, they were like, wow, okay, we didn't know that. So I said, wait, you're a Weber. You've been around since 1952 and you got me to teach you this kinds of things. So what I learned is that I have a lot of executive chefs come to my school. The head chef of Disney is in my school, Four Seasons, and so on, right? Rich Carlton. So I asked them, why do you come to my class? Because I'm just a quack. I'm just an IT guy from LA cooking barbecue. And these guys have credentials. They run like 500 restaurants around the world. And they come to my school because, and they tell me, you know what they tell me? They tell me, Harry, I learned a lot of new things from you. This was not taught at the Culinary Institute. This was not taught at Cordon Bleu. And they spend years in that profession without understanding the science, because I'm a science guy. So I'm a science guy first and then a cook second. Kind of make sense? I didn't start off as a cook learning science. I'm a science guy, always trying to understand why, driving all my teachers crazy. So that's a kind of a process and journey that I went through. And I'm trying to pass that journey on to you. Does it make sense? That's why we're having all these calls and all these videos, because I really want to give you all this knowledge. I can't take it with me. I'm going to pass it on to you, and all of you are going to be ambassadors of barbecue love, because I want you to go and teach the world that you throw the chunks underneath your charcoal, you're going to get a superior result. And I always tell people, don't believe a single word I said. I want you to know, belief is cheap. There's a lot of people in the world talking.
Yeah.
So don't believe anything
Believe in-
anyone says. You need
Harry,
to know.
but-
The only way to know is to do.
But believe, but verify.
Verify, yeah, trust, but verify. Don't believe me, because there's a lot of experts online on different channels, right? Telling you all these kinds of things, right? Left is right and right is left, black is white, white is black, up is down, so on. So again, I always try to tell people that your ability to succeed as a human being on earth is not based on finding information anymore. I'm from an era where when I go to the library, I had to go to the card catalog to look for an author, and then go onto the shelf on the library floor to find the information. Today, the world has changed. The information is delivered right to your fingertip. When Catherine was talking about the Hunsaker, or the what do you call the low slow device, all I need is I go to this top monitor and I type in the search key, and that device shows up. So in an instant, literally 10 seconds, I could see what Catherine was referring to. So your challenge today, being a Homo sapien, to be able to survive this world and survive Darwinian selection, is your ability to be able to discern the truth from the falsehood. And that is a skill that I want every single one on this call to realize, because barbecue is a great metaphor, a great analogy for your need to be successful as a human being, to be able to filter out information and decide which is the truth and which is not. Sound cool? Team had a question.
Yeah, hi, Harry. Harry, I got a pellet grill, but I recently bought a 22-inch kettle. It's an S&S with a slow and sear. And my first double question, briquettes or lump?
Simple question, right? Get the BTU you like. Remember earlier we talked about BTU, right? So understand that the briquette achieves two purposes, the lignin and the BTU. Can they be together in one product? The answer is yes. But the thing is, you need to decide for your own flavor preferences, what do you want? And once you separate the two, you are better able to control BTU and lignin in your pit, regardless whether you use slow and sear, you use bricks to separate the hot and cold zone, or you use a Weber wings or whatever. So I've given you guys the foundational basics to be able to break apart your problem. And I've given you in a framework of 3 Lego blocks. The 3 Lego blocks are the BTU, the lignin, and the draft. So if you know how to juggle the 3 Lego blocks, you can get great results on any equipment that you have.
Is hotter better?
I'm sorry?
Is hotter better?
Hotter is dependent upon the BTU. What BTU are you looking for?
Well,
Will the BTU interfere with the generation of the pyrolysis of the lignin? You got to ask yourself that question. Is the slow and sear the right device?
quick, it is for this. A quick story. I purchased online an expensive New York strip, 2 inches thick on purpose. I was going to do a reverse sear. I did do a reverse sear. I had some B&B charcoal left, so I used that a few to keep it down to try to do the slow, what do you call it, the indirect part. And then I bought Jealous Devil because I saw the Jealous Devil guy talk about it. And then first of all, that Jealous Devil burns hot, the briquettes. Man.
Yeah.
So I put it in and I got lucky. First of all, the indirect came up too fast, and then I seared it, and I got lucky. It came out medium rare, but it didn't look like a reverse sear. So I also have some lump. I'm just curious, which should I have both, depending on what I want to do? Is that what you're saying?
All right, so let me just break down the answer for you in the manner I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So all charcoal burn at different temperature. Do you know why they burn at different temperatures?
They're more pure, I thought.
Okay, all right, so let me back up. So I didn't get my message across. So let me just back up and explain again the thing called lignin. Lignin is the resin, the third component in wood that makes it hard. So you have cellulose, hemicellulose, and you have lignin. There are thousands of lignins in the world. What is Jealous Devil made of? Do you know?
No.
Okay, so let me kind of explain. So it's very important for you when you are a pitmaster, you need to know your fuels well. And if you go to their website and you ask and you look for the origin of the charcoal, it's very important because the original lignin is very important. Jealous Devil comes from a wood in Paraguay, Queso Blanco, which is Paraguayan axe wood. Now, the key word is axe. When you hear the word axe wood, what does it conjure in your mind? Is it hard or is it soft?
Hard.
Hard, because it breaks axes. Okay. So there's a clue. So you gotta go online because you have the most powerful tools, your keyboard and your fingertips, right? You go online, you study the origin of the charcoal that you are buying because it's your money. You pay a lot of money for it. You're paying a lot of money because you have this Paraguayan axe wood that breaks axes called Queso Blanco that has a very hard lignin, which means that it burns hot. So you're going to get a lot of BTU in your pit. So let's talk about one aspect of the pit so you know how to control it, BTU. Now, if you have a very hot heat source, right? When you put your meat close to the heat source, the meat will get hotter. If you move your meat sauce away from the fire or from the BTU, it's a cooler environment. When you want to reverse sear a steak or smoke and sear a steak, I recommend you smoke the steak at around 275 degree type BTU. So what you need to do is you need to adjust your slow and sear to achieve that right temperature consistently in the sweet spot in your pit that you're cooking your steak. That's the first step. So that's called indirect setup. You need to know how to set up your slow and sear so that the indirect portion is going to hit around 275-ish. That is dependent upon the charcoal you use. So when you use Fogo, you use, what do you call a Kingsford or use whatever it is, it's all going to generate different results. So that's BTU. So BTU is a factor of the lignin, the heat of the burn, how far your meat is from the fire. That's the first thing. So you got to master that. You got to get that tweaked out. And the second question that you might have is that what kind of smoke flavor do I want on the meat? That depends upon the kind of lignin you want to bryolyze, you want to evaporate to create the proper carbanols and phenols so that your meat will be absolutely amazing in terms of smoke flavor. Right intensity, right flavor notes, right balance. Now, I will tell you up front, right? The number one mistake I've seen in beginner pitmasters around the world, doesn't matter if I'm teaching in London, Kuala Lumpur, Australia, it's the same problem. Over smoking is the number one problem. Everybody has the same problem. They always think the piece of meat is like, oh man, this is way too smoky. So if you eat my food or eat my class.
2 chunks all I use. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
2 chunks is all I use.
2 chunks, okay. So that's fine. So then I'm going to talk about the third thing. The third thing is the searing. The searing that you have that you seem to want is a factor of BTU alone. You don't get any smoke when you're searing because searing is going to be done hot. So my formula is 600 degrees, 60 seconds. That's my formula. And the tool you need to buy is a grill grate. So for those of you on this call and you need me to call your significant other or have your significant other call me to authorize your purchase, I will definitely be happy to authorize the purchase, but I can't guarantee you what will happen to you after the call. Okay?
Harry,
I'm willing to do that for my patrons.
Harry, on a boneless though, on the grill grate, do I want the grill marks or flip it over and do a full sear on the flat part?
That's a 3-hour argument as to whether the cast iron sear or the diamond grill marks will work. I'm a competitor, so I've been teaching a lot of my students how to do the SCA sear. Again, it's a 3-hour argument. I've judged SCA contests that eat 50 steaks, tough life. It's kind of a toss up. I try not to grade it down if somebody turns in a cast iron sear, because you can flip the grill gate over and then use it as a griddle, sear that way. I think the jury is kind of mixed. I believe that, you know, if I were competing, I would always turn in the diamond grill box, not because I like it, just because, you know, you're there to win a contest. So when you compete in steaks, it's not about what you want. It's pleasing, you know, a bunch of strangers. For home use, I like a cast iron sear. So like, for example, Labor Day, I'm going to be cooking some steaks. I'll just do it on my cast iron. I just actually like it that way. Okay,
Hey, Harry.
Who's the next question? Bruce?
Yeah, Bruce Johnston. That's funny you mentioned grill grates. I just ordered grill grates for my Traeger 780 and for my Kasori air fryer. They've got a 15% discount this weekend using Labor Day 15. Now, my question on the grill grates, will that help for the Traeger also?
I am not very familiar with Traeger, but the grill grate is designed for searing. You know that, right?
Yeah.
And searing temperatures are above 500. So the searing temperature is between 500 to 700. So if your pit can reach that successfully without causing a grease fire, that's a joke, by the way, okay, because of the smoke fire, then the grill grates will work. I recommend people throw the grill grate on your gas grill. I'm sure you have a gas grill, right, Bruce?
No, I can't get permission from my wife for the gas grill.
Well, yeah, after the call, you say, this guy named Harry Soo from Los Angeles, right, authorize you to buy a gas grill, and have her call me and I'll authorize it with the phone, no problem. Do a favor for you. Yeah, I'm joking aside, a gas grill is a very handy accessory.
Yeah,
I'm agnostic, right? Whether you cook in a gas grill, you cook in an oven, you cook in a sous vide, you cook in a convection, it really doesn't matter. So long as you understand the three elements I taught you today, BTU,
Yep.
lignin, and drag. Once you understand that, you can accomplish those three parameters in any way you want.
Well, we love our Traeger for barbecue. In fact, for the first time, I tried the hot and fast that your recommendation with the Traeger. Now, I only went up to 375 for the high portion. I was afraid to push it much higher because I've read a lot about the augers getting deformed as far as cooling down fast.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what, we got like a 12-pound brisket done in a little over 5 hours. And it tastes the best brisket we've ever done. And we've had Traeger since 2006.
Yeah, again, my good buddy Diva Danielle represents Traeger. My good buddy Doug Scheiding represents Traeger. So they are a world-class brand. And at the end of the day, I will say again, it's always about the pitmaster, never about the pit. Repeat that 5 times. We want to get away from what I call gas gear acquisition syndrome. People obsess over the pedigree of their pit, the pros and cons of their pit instead of cooking. So I would recommend just go out and cook and have fun. If you have a kettle, you know, that's the best $150 you can spend because you can have so much fun on a kettle. And, you know, you just cook the food because once you cook 100 briskets, right, you will become a brisket whisperer. You don't have to keep calling me and telling me, you know, this is that. Once you cook, you will know. And hopefully my sharing of the knowledge will expedite your journey because if you watch one of my videos, it could jumpstart your learning curve a year because I've covered a lot of the pitfalls that typically what I've seen. And I've done what I call 200-300 classes the past 12 years to 4,000 people. So I pretty much can sense what the problem is even before you ask me because I do 60,000 comments a year on 13 platforms. So I kind of get a good sense on the pulse of the challenges that beginners put out. So actually I was going to try to do a series of videos, right? Like top 10 mistakes in ribs, top 10 mistakes in pork, top 10 mistakes in tri-tip, because I've kind of seen it all.
Hey, Harry, before I forget, if you know, T-Roy, do you know if he's feeling okay?
T-Roy is, let's see, how should I say this? T-Roy is okay. He's just having some challenges. So I actually plan to fly out to see him as soon as I can.
Great. Glad
Okay.
to hear it. Yeah.
Harry, really quick. As far as you mentioned gas grills, have you ever cooked with an infrared? And are there differences that you've seen? I'm in the market for a new grill, and you see the infrared, and there's some pluses to it, and also I've never really used to it. I've never used
Okay,
it.
so let me back up and say, what is the infrared attachment on a gas grill, right? Infrared attachment is where they have a ceramic little tray, and then they pump the gas through the ceramic tray and they light it. The characteristic of an infrared burner or infrared sear accessory is to have high temperatures. I have a Costco Kirkland gas grill that I've been using in my class for many years now because I wanted to buy a burner to put onto my countertop, and they wanted $5,000 for a burner. So I said, what? I'm not paying $5,000 for a burner. So I invested the $5,000 under the granite countertop for the outdoor kitchen. So that's kind of how I spend the money. I built a little garage and I bought a $600 Costco, doohickey thingy with 4 burners and an oven and a side grill and everything else, right? And it's really cheap. It came with that infrared burner. The infrared burner crapped out within a year. So now I'm online trying to find a replacement part. And there's no replacement part. So I guess I had to replace the entire $700 grill to get a new infrared burner. The infrared burner is a high temperature BTU source. It doesn't provide any smoke. A normal gas grill, the burners themselves usually can't get as hot as the infrared searing accessory that comes with the gas grill setup. Whether you want one or not is kind of entirely up to you, because if on my particular Costco Kirkland, when I turn my burners on high, I put my grill grate on, I easily get 600 degrees and it's very stable. So I did not need that searing burner, and I'm not replacing the searing burner in my Costco grill. I'm using the area where the old broken searing burner is as kind of a place to put my spatula and tongs. Okay, so that's my kind of take on it. Mark.
All right, I got a couple of questions. You talk about gear acquisition syndrome, and that I get. In my case, it's a bit weird. Once my family discovered that I was starting to do barbecue, all of a sudden for Hanukkah and my birthday, I started receiving gear. And I'm sitting there, I have 2 pieces that were given to me. I didn't buy them, but I want to get your opinion on them. One is obviously one of these things. My mom bought me this.
Yeah, smoke tube. Yeah, those are good.
The other one is, and this is one I don't even know I'm ever going to use, if I can find it here. Yeah, right here. It's one of these silly cold smoker attachments. Again, I didn't buy these. They were given to me.
Okay, I can speak to the first one. I don't know the second one, so I'll speak to the first one. Smoke tube is helpful when you have a pellet cooker. Pellet cookers traditionally, when they're used conventionally is the word, they really have a lesser smoke flavor. Now, which is what I prefer. Don't get me wrong. I'm a kind of a lower flavor, smoke flavor kind of person. And also it matters kind of what age range you're in. I realize as I get older, right, I prefer less smoke, which is kind of unusual, right? And I've told you guys before, women in general prefer less smoke. So if you're happy wife equals happy life, if you have a partner, you don't want to overdo things. And I always believe subtlety is the key. The complexity of barbecue comes through all the flavor notes on the food, not just the smoke. It comes from the seasoning, the mop, the liquid, moisture, tenderness, and so on. So the smoke tube is definitely a good idea if you have a pellet cooker. Do you have a pellet cooker, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you want a little bit more smoke on it and you don't want to do a multi-stage cook, you can use the smoke tube. I overcome the pellet disadvantage of lesser smoke by doing 2 things. I modify the pellets I use. So I like to use either the Jealous Devil Jacks or I use the GMG Gold Blend. That's how I overcome it. Then more importantly, I overcome the lesser smoke on a pellet cooker by doing a multi-stage cook. So you see me many times, I start my pellet cooker at 180. And then I pump it to 200, 225, and then just kind of ramp it up to 275. The advantage of using a pellet cooker also is that I use my pellet cooker to thaw my meats, because sometimes I don't have time to thaw my meats. So I'll share with you guys a little tip, a black belt tip. I season my meat that is either frozen or cold, and I put in a pellet cooker to thaw at 180. So I'm actually accomplishing 2 objectives in the same amount of time. I clear my refrigerator because my refrigerator is always full of meats. I put the semi-frozen meat into my pellet cooker at 180. I'm getting a longer temperature gradient because the meat is colder and it's got a long temperature gradient to climb to 200 degrees. And I'm actually able to get a better smoke ring on it. So I've given you 3 or 4 tips right there in the past 10 seconds, right? So it's not conventional, but you can do that on a pellet cooker because it's a 1-button press. You just press it on, set it to 180, toss your meat on, take off. And I couldn't do that on a Weber Smokey.
Yeah, this thing my parents got, I never even heard of it. You're supposed to drill a hole in the side of your thing. It's a cold smoker attachment. And you're supposed to put the wood or whatever, and it's got a grate in there, and it creates its own draft from the bottom. I've never used it. I don't even think I ever will. I was just wondering if you'd ever seen one or what you thought of them. That's all.
I know cold smoking is popular for cheeses, right? So you can do cold smoking for things like cheeses and so on, and it's wonderful. I've actually tasted quite a lot of cold smoking product. But actually, the place I ran into was New Zealand. When I taught a class in Auckland, one of the students, he was like a cold smoking aficionado, and he brought a whole bunch of food to class, and I tasted it and I said, wow, how do you make this? Like, okay, it's all cold smoking. Now, I want to caution you, cold smoking does have dangers because you're not cooking the food to the right temperature. So you really need to know what you're doing, because cold smoking may cause you some pathogenic type of problem. So you should go to a cold smoking expert website and then learn more before you venture too far. I believe smoking things like cheese is pretty innocuous. But once you get into the more esoteric cold smoking stuff, it's kind of like sous vide, right? Sous vide, I don't really do sous vide on my channel because sous vide does have its own set of health risks. Like pathogenic risks that I will never have, because I cook with smoke, and smoke is antibacterial, antifungal, antimicrobial. So smoking is really, really safe.
Yeah, my parents wanted me to bought that for me because they wanted me to make lox, and I'm like,
oh, lox, yeah, absolutely. Like Graf lox is wonderful. Yeah, you can do a cure with brown sugar and dill. There's a whole genre of what I call Scandinavian cooking, which I have not been able to get into, but it's going to be amazing. Yeah, I'm going to try to fly to the place on Earth where 1/3 of the molten lava flows out of the ground, which is Iceland, and half of Iceland is moving towards America. Half of Iceland is moving towards Europe, and my bucket list is to grill a steak on molten lava. So I found some people in Iceland who are willing to take me up on this crazy adventure. So watch out for some more crazy ass adventures from Harry.
Hey, Harry, I had a cold smoker on my first Traeger, and I loved it for nuts and for cheeses. When the big thing on smoking cheese is you've got to be able to get below 100 degrees. Any more than that, you're going to melt the cheese.
Yes, and if you cook certain foods under 100, right, there's a chance of bacterial type situation. I'm sure nuts are edible, so nuts are safe. Cheese is probably very safe. Yeah. But some of the other things you can cold smoke, you just need to make sure that you understand and you know what you're doing. Okay, we kind of run over. It's 10:30, and I just want to see if we can round up with the last few questions here. Catherine, you have a question?
Well, yeah, it has nothing to do with actually anything we've been talking about, other than my husband has a question. He wants to know if anybody knows of a good source to find a cart to put the Kamado Joe in and or a BGE. We'd like to have one place to set it and have a work table. Now I have the Kamado Joe standing on its own and a utility work table, and I put a link on the chat to show you what I'm talking about, if anybody knows.
I recommend, and I've actually gotten post-production gear for entertainment from Etsy now. They have a lot of people making these, and there's a great solid table for a Kamado cooker. If you look it up on Etsy, you can see based on price. Some are like $700 and some are $2,000, depending on what you're getting with them. But they can hold the weight and actually are mobile. And the quality of stuff we've got from Etsy is pretty good.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone have any final questions? And before we end, I want to make sure that I answer all your questions. And if you guys find these like Sunday morning fireside chats helpful, let me know. The weekends that I'm not traveling, I'm happy to kind of get on with a cup of Java here and then kind of tell you guys that bottom of the pyramid, the iceberg, because you guys seem to be quite interested to know what's underneath the iceberg, because on a YouTube video and on a short, I can only show you the tip. And I know a lot of people, they want to know what's the science behind it. I'm happy to spend time with you to kind of talk about anything you want and help you guys on your journey, because I always believe that knowledge is power, allows you to find the truth so that you can discover your own truth in your journey of barbecue and spreading barbecue love. Did Rick have a question?
Yeah, so as somebody that suffers from gas, which cooker should I use for what? So I have a drum, I have a pellet grill, a Mac, and I have a Kamado Joe, and I have a PK 360, which I pretty much just use for steaks. But what should I use the others for?
My recommendation
I'm having a tough time with the
what
Kamado.
meat are you cooking? So I'll tell you my favorite, right? So if I'm cooking ribs, my PBC is the one I go to, pit barrel. For ribs, I'll use a pit barrel.
Yeah, I
For
use the drum.
Kamado,
So, yeah.
yeah, the drum is pretty universal. The drum, I can do anything on a drum. It's just that it's a royal pain to clean a drum. Because, every time I lean into that 55-gallon, I feel I'm going to tip over and drown. Because it's just a hassle. So my standard response is, what pit is my favorite pit? My favorite pit is a clean pit. Okay, I have 22 pits. So you can tell, right? It's kind of like my knives. I have 66 knives. And people say, Harry, why do you need so many knives? Because whenever it gets dull, I just buy another one. Okay. So I have a confession here to make, right? Next to folding laundry, cleaning pits is the pits. Okay, pun intended. So to answer your question, Rick, obviously I have a favorite tool, favorite hammer for every job. And right now, the way I see it is I've given you the knowledge. I've empowered you with the knowledge to essentially use any pit you want to generate absolutely fabulous results, right? And if whatever pit is clean, for example, I'll give you an example, your Mac. Your Mac suffers from airflow problems, right? It's got a lot of airflow. It's got a lot of hot spots. So all you need to do on a Mac is, people who use the Mac will tell me, they just need to find the sweet spot. They need to be able to tweak the PID so that it generates the right environment and temperature in the sweet spot to create great food. Now, I also heard from people that they say they don't trust the temperature gauge. Put a potato into your Mac, stick a temperature probe through the potato, and put it into different spots and measure the temperature. Find where your sweet spots are on your Mac. Try to keep your food in that sweet spot. Fiddle with the PID. So when you set 275, but the sweet spot is 250, go ahead and set 275 on the PID so that the sweet spot's at 250. Don't trust electronics. Measure and calibrate the sweet spot.
And I pretty much use the center of the second rack for cooking.
Cool. So there you already know. So vary the position, vary the height, vary the grade level so that you can get the results you do. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to go back to what I told you at the start of this call. It's BTU, it's lignin, and it's draft. Once you master those three, you have deciphered the mystique and the mystery of barbecue. Just three things. If you understand those three things and you manipulate and massage those three things, you will be able to create very, very good barbecue in any setting and not suffer from gas, right? Okay, with that, thank you all for coming to this session. If there's any residual questions, please go ahead and, I'll post the recording. We went an hour and a half. My God. You think people want to watch the rerun?
Sure. Hey, Harry, better hurry up.
You covered a lot.
It's gonna be gone.
Yeah, okay. So I'll just post the rerun on for patrons, whoever missed the thing. And maybe they're driving across the country on Labor Day weekend. They need to be entertained for an hour and 40 minutes. They can listen to our banter. And hopefully, everybody gets something out of it. There is obviously a lot of depth in barbecue. And, in these sessions, I can touch on various topics. So, like one of the topics I was going to think of doing is how to make barbecue sauce. Because a lot of people are asking me, like, what's this mystique barbecue sauce? Well, with Harry's Lego block approach to life, there's really no mystique. I can make you 7 sauces on a lickety split, just like that, and to kind of talk you through what are the basics of making these building blocks. Because I build everything in barbecue using this building block idea. Same with my rub, same with my seasoning, same with sauces. So if you guys have any interest, maybe I'll do a future session where I actually cook on the session and then show you guys how to break down 7 sauces in 7 minutes. They just say that 7 sauces in 7. Wow, that's a really good tagline. 7 sauces in 7 minutes by Harry. Okay, so with that, super thankful to everybody for joining this session. If you guys are in LA, you can join me. I'm gonna drive down to see Winnie now. I'm sure she's swamped because they open at 10 o'clock, right? So I need to get there before the brisket's all sold out. So I want to make sure that, so you can follow my feed downtown. I'm gonna be posting from downtown once I get there. So you can see most importantly, support a fellow patron. I mean, Winnie is kicking ass, kicking butt, on the circuit. So we want to go ahead and help her out. All right. So with that, thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you guys next time.